Back row. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Okay. I'm going to be reading from a thing. I hope that's specific enough for you guys. Some people really hated this thing, and some people only hated it a little bit. So I'll be interested to hear you guys' opinions. Thank you for the one laugh over there. Yeah, so as Jesse said, it's an excerpt from a novella which may turn into a short novel, and there's a lot of kind of storylines that go into this thing. It's kind of difficult to explain, but essentially it's all the events surrounding the first episode of a web series that's about artistic suicide. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So this is just one viewpoint from the novella. The 7 attorneys retained yearly by the corporation whose subsidiary they've been representing for the past 7 months flocked in a V or frown formation to the small table on which were laid out, completely and utterly gratis as far as they could tell, a small array of refreshments. Tread upon in the process, a checkered carpet that looked to be recently, if not just the night before, shampooed or steam cleaned and peripherally at a slant as a result of the way same-colored boxes seem to just or not quite touch each other. The colors a positively blushing dark purplish indigo and grass-stained green, which struck the attorneys as vaguely natured or trying hard to be vaguely natured. The attorneys moved synchronously, as if long adjusted to the length and style of each other's gaits, the distances required for maximum social ease. Through some innocuous communicational error, they were entirely unaware of the CEO's decision the night before to axe the web series at the bleeding heart of the conflict they were here trying to resolve. They were literally in the dark. The conference room they'd been herded into's location was perfectly due west, shaded entirely from the sun. It was also very, very big. The building housing them stood at a slant and swayed subtly and spinally, and not quite rhythmically, in the flouncing wind propelled off the coast, not 2 miles away. Much of its exterior was constructed of laminated glass with a dramatic tint, capillary with steel crossbeams. The scent of polyurethane grooved faintly. A kind of soothing rustic verdigris had been slopped onto and smeared all around the room's 3 interior walls. The color clashed outrageously with the carpet's color scheme. On the whole, the room felt, to the attorneys, unfinished somehow. In the early mid-morning, the sun's light was clear and soft and slightly filtered through strips of cirrus clouds, presenting as dashes of chalk across the sky's slight and cerulean convexity. Spread out on a folding table, spackled with old turd-shaped stains, were 7 varieties of bagel. Excitement, plain Jane, whole hell of a lot of wheat, oatmeal craisin, opium eater, cheap as poppy seed, everything, in parentheses, and more. Devil's in the details, which is chocolate chip. Approximately 2 of each kind were arranged in a roughly concentric pattern and just softly kissing the glass of a sweating carafe of orange juice, pulp-free, the attorneys noted on close observation. The conference table had been removed from or was never put in the room, whose perimeter, without furniture, seemed to contract rather than expand, and in addition gave more credence to its unfinished feel they felt. Sensory perceptions are easily manipulated and not to be trusted, was the genuine consensus. They lie. The building's ostensible purpose was to accommodate the south regional innards of a major national satellite provider, but certain floors were kindly rented out to other companies in tangential but not directly competing industries. It stood hulking at a slant on the southeast corner of a big intersection in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The mystery of who exactly had set up the refreshment table became, briefly, a topic of discussion among the attorneys. Had it been the major national satellite provider who provided the breakfast materials, or the attorneys' opponents who'd made the request of meeting here under the auspices, within the hot choking throat, a few of them thought privately, of a sometimes nefarious giant in the industry. The attorneys held degrees, respectively, from Harvard, Yale, Harvard, in the University of Florida. They range in age from 27 to 32. They could choose between whipped and light cream cheeses on which to spread their bagels. The fraudulence and insincerity and general no-goodness of their opponents, the 7 attorneys believed, was being exposed by the fervor of their clients, and by extension their belief in the righteousness of the attorneys, and by extension their clients' argument. This was the gist of why they were here where they'd never been before. All 7 of them believed they were, and readily and vocally self-identified as, idealists. Their youth and idealism, or i.e. the reason such youthful and idealistic attorneys were chosen from among hundreds of attorneys on the corporation's retainer, can be attributed to the youth and idealism of the corporation's maybe too intimately connected subsidiary, smartart.com, a web-based collaborative project with a total permanent staff of 5. Specializing in grants, support, and publication of serious intellectual works of art across multiple media and genres. The corporation felt the attorneys representing the subsidiary in such a potentially seminal case needed to project a certain, quote, smart art feel and or demeanor, the gist of which is youth and idealism, end quote. According to notes on the meeting typed up on the CEO's own special letterhead paper, accidentally, the following morning by a secretary who just the night before jumped off the wagon and woke up saddled with a hugely, monstrously awful hangover. The far-thinking executive assistant to the vice president of media relations, whose reputation for far-thinking had been earned on a single comment made as a joke, taken seriously, followed through with, and deemed a success, and who now felt required, unfairly, to toss out such jokes regularly, and soul-crushingly to really have to believe in them, mused in the confidential air of one of numerous executive closed-door meetings on the topic about the possibility of a Hollywood film somewhere down the line, should the case go to court and in going to court, go their way. Most of the other executives and executive assistants thought it best to find a way to settle and keep the thing out of the courts. It was the CEO's firm belief in the idea of himself as a media visionary that had up until then preserved the web series. But his patience had corroded completely, as was mentioned the night before. The containers containing the spreads were, like the carafe, sweating. A small but pungent sourness wafted up from their source. The ceiling's abnormal lift, combined with a poorly designed vent system, probably having to do with the age of the building, left the room just a tad too uncomfortably warm. The airflow moved languidly, descending at just the subtlest of subtle diagonals, from the eastern corner of the room to the west. 5 of the attorneys lived with a mild lactose intolerance, and had spent years discovering and perfecting techniques to minimize the smell and sound of their, what one termed it privately, quote, gaseous exclamations, end quote. The western half of the room was approximately anywhere between 1 to 3 degrees cooler than the eastern half, where the refreshment table was set up. There was general agreement about the weirdness of the absence of coffee, along with private and separate musings, in light of the carafes and 2 tubs condensation, about just how long the refreshments had been sitting out. Again, the question of the source of the refreshments was asked and left unanswered. None of this stopped the attorneys from handling the bagels, jostling for position on the perceived best variety, or making lewd and traditional gestural analogies comparing the bagels' coined and central openings to certain essentially appealing nooks in the female anatomy. The lack of gender diversity among the attorneys had ceased long ago to be an uncomfortable fact. It was, they were assured, simply a statistical anomaly. The corporation would loudly cry discrimination if asserted otherwise. The 7 attorneys had spent approximately 7 minutes in the conference room. Their cuticles were immaculate, of which they were all painfully aware. Triggers are often actually quite difficult to pull. Thank you.